We begin in Masechet today the third parak of Sotah with the Mishnah on Daf Yutes Amud Aleph. Hayanotel es minchasa mitoch kfifa mitzris. We've already learned earlier that the mincha of a sotah should be placed into this kind of a basket that's made of a part of the decal tree, and in order to make her very exhausted and fatigued, she would have to carry this mincha around, and hopefully she would decide that she'll admit and confess her crime, and then we don't need mechikas Hashem. And now what happens is the Baal has to take the mincha from her hand and nosna v'nosna letoch kli sharis. Now he has to be makadesh the mincha by taking it out of the kfifa and placing it into a kli sharis. And it doesn't have to be done by a kohen, because the avodas hakohen that's exclusive to a kohen is the kmitza of the mincha. This is before the kmitza, it's the kiddush ha-mincha in a kli sharis, and that kshera afilu bizar. Now, v'nosnal yada. Now, as far as the bailus over the carbon is concerned, she, the sotah, is considered the balas ha-carbon, and therefore the kli has to be returned to her hands, because with regard to tenufa, there's halacha that the bailim have to do tenufa. The Gemara is going to derive that from psukim, and yet the kohen also has to do tenufa, and that's also written in the Torah. How do you reconcile the fact that both the kohen and the bailim have to do tenufa? Who's going to actually do the tenufa? But kohen miniach yado mitachteo minifa. Halach is that the kohen puts his hands under the hands of the bala carbon, in this case the isha, and together they do a joint tenufa. There's a long discussion here about kiur. Kiur means something that's kind of like indicative of an illicit relationship between a man and a woman, and by putting the kohen, by his putting his hands underneath her hands, it would seem that that's like a provocative kind of action. And Tosfos quotes the Yerushalmi that they bring a kohen zaken, an elderly kohen, so it doesn't look like kiur. Tosfos offers another teretz. He says even if it's a young kohen, then we're not choshesh here that this is a kind of a yetzer hara, because it's only for a short period of time, and it's only for the sake of the carbon of b'shamu etes ein yetzer hara sholet. And the tshuvas here of the Beis Yehudas, they add that at that moment in the Azara, they're standing there with the Rav, and therefore there's no chash of Avera. Also, she's in a state of nivul, and it's repulsive, the fact that she's guilty of a Maisa Erva, and therefore we're not choshesh that a person would have some sort of a chait with her. Heinif, so the Kohen did the tenufa together with the Isha. Vehigish, now the Kohen brings the mincha to be korev on the Keren Maravis Dromis of the Mizbeach, as we learned back on Daf Yudalim and Beis. And we don't require that the kometz itself actually touch the Mizbeach. It's enough if the kli comes in contact with the Mizbeach, because the mincha is inside the kli. Hamatz, at this point, the Kohen does kmitza with his 3 fingers, and he takes a kometz from the mincha. And exactly how much of a volume the kmitza has to be is a machlokas in the Gemara in Menachos Chavav, whether it has to be 2 zeisim or one kizayis would be sufficient. We paskin that you need at least ein kometz pachos mishnei zeisim v'ashar nechol l'kohen, and like in any mincha, the shiorei hamincha are eaten by the kohen. And at this point, the Mishnah records a machlokas between the Chachamim and Rabbi Shimon, and the Gemara is going to go into the different readings of the Seder Apsukim about the question of whether the Hashkas HaSotah comes before the Akrovas HaMincha or after the Akrovas HaMincha. According to the Chachamim, once the Kohen takes the Mincha from the Kfifa, puts it into a klishares, and then he did the tnufa. At that point, hayamashke, he would be mashke the mei murarim to the isha. And only afterwards was he makte the mincha al gabi mizbech. So the hashkar comes first, and the haktorah comes second, and that's what the chachamim understand from the Seder Apsukim. Although there's one pasuk that we'll see that Reb Shimon is going to quote that seems to be an explicit contradiction to the assumption of the Chachamim, and that pasuk indicates that first there would be first there would be Haktorah and then Hashka. Rabbi Shimon Omer Makaris Minchasa, first Haktorah, v'yakach Mashka, then Hashka. Shenemar, because it says explicitly in the pasuk v'achar, meaning after the Haktorah, Yashkes ha'isha es hamayim. Then there's Hashka. However, the Seder of Rabbi Shimon is not ma'akev, v'im hishka. If he reversed the order and mistakenly he was mashke the Sotah before the Haktorah Samincha, v'akach hikrivs minchasa, ksheira. Nevertheless, the mincha is a mincha ksheira. And the Gemara is going to go through the various psukim, because it says hashka in the pasuk. It says it 3 different times, and the question is what to derive from each of those 3 different times. The Gemara says, Amalei Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yoshia de Dari. Dari means his cousin. Lo seise vakar. Don't sit down until you explain this milsa. The Gemara says, what kind of question is that? You're asking where's the source for tnufa in mincha sota? The Torah says explicitly, No. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Elazar was asking a different question. How do we know that the tnufa has to be done by the isha? The pasuk seems to indicate the lokach hakohen vehenif es mincha, that the kohen does the tnufa. And the Gemara says we're going to derive this from a gzeirah shav. This is Rav Oshia's response to the question of Rabbi Elazar. Asya yad mishlomim. The din of tnufa in a carbon shlomim, which applies to chazeh, v'shok, ve'emurim, that din of tnufa is going to be the paradigmic case of tnufa from which we're going to derive the tnufa of the sotah in minchas sotah, meaning the fundamental principle that the Bailim have to implement the tnufa is derived from tnufas chazeh v'shok in shlomim. Now, how do we get from shlomim over to mincha? Shlomim is a zevach, and mincha is a mincha. Not only that, but shlomim applies to general karbanos of shlomim, and now we want to know something about the mincha sotah. And for that we need gzeirah shav. Ksiv hach, it says in mincha sotah. So let's emphasize the word miyad. Uksiv hasam, and with regard to carbon shlomim, Vayikra Perek Zayin, it says yadav yiviena to Vienna. So the word yadav indicates the yadayim of the Baal HaKarban. Makan. Just like with regard to Sotah, where we saw the Torah says explicitly, L'kacha kohen v'heinif. So therefore you need a tenufa of a kohen. Af lahalon, Sotah l'gabi shlamim, we're going to derive through this Gzeirah Shava that the tenufa is al yedei kohen. So that's what Minchas Sotah is teaching me about the tenufa of shlamim. Now we go the other way around. What does the tenufa of shlamim teach me about the tenufa of Minchas Sotah? Malahala, just like in shlamim, the Torah says that we need tenufa of the bailim. And Rashi explains, how do we know this? Because the pasuk Yadav Tiviena, which is referring to tenufa, is written with regard to the bailim. Is Afkan here too in Sotah? The Minchas Sotah requires tenufa al yedei bailim. HaKetzad. So how do you reconcile this? On the one hand, you see in the pasuk that the tenufa has to be implemented by the kohen. On the other hand, from the Gzeirah Shava to shlamim, we derive that the bailim have to do the tenufa. The answer is HaKetzad meniach yado tachas yad bailim umenif. They do a joint tenufa. The Mishnah says heinif v'higish komatz. Hayam mashke v'achkach makravis minchasa. So the Gemara understood here that this is the Seder Akrovas HaMincha and Ashkos HaSotah. So it says HaAkrova. The Mishnah says Heinif v'higish komatz v'hiktir. So the word v'hiktir means that he was already maktir the Mincha Sotah, meaning the kometz of the Mincha. So if they already brought the Mincha, how can the Mishnah then say that after the Ashkah, Makravis Minchasa, they already brought the Mincha? Mar says, Hachikam, you misunderstood the Mishnah. Say there, Menachos Ketzad. The Mishnah is not addressing the actual step-by-step process. The Mishnah is giving you a general overview of the Seder. And the Seder is what? Heinif v'higish komatz v'hiktir. That within the process of the Aktoras Mincha, you need number one, Tenufa, you need Hagasha, you need Kmitza, and then finally it culminates with Haktorah, and then Vashar, the balance, and the Shirayim from the Kometz is Nechal HaKohanim. And then the Mishnah goes on to ask the question about Hashkah Gufa. When is the Hashkah? Is the Hashkah going to precede the Mincha? And that's going to be the Shita of the Chachamim. Or is the Mincha going to precede the Hashkah like the Shitas Rabbi Shimon? Hashkah Gufa Pligi Rabbi Shimon Rabbanon. Rabbanon Savri Mashke V'Yachkach Makrav Es Minchasa. That first comes the Hashkah. And Rabbi Shimon Savri Makrav Es Minchas V'Yachkach Mashke Shedem Aviyachar Yashke. However, even according to Rav Shimon, the Mishnah points out that in Hishkav Yakach Hikrivis Minchasa, if he switched around the order and the Kohen made a mistake and he was mashke the Sotah before the Akrova, then Rabbi Shimon concedes that the Akrova is Kshera.